Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a case that, well, it continues to fascinate and trouble so many. The 1996 death of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey.
Right, in Boulder, Colorado, just after Christmas.
Yeah.
It's a truly enduring mystery.
And for this deep dive, you've provided a really fascinating collection of material.
We have quite a mix. There's a YouTube analysis looking at body language, John and Patty Ramsey's.
Interesting.
Yeah, and news reports for context and updates, some bits from documentaries, and then the crucial stuff on forensics and the different theories that have popped up.
Exactly. So our goal here is to really, dig into these sources, pull out the most significant pieces, and help you, our listener, get a clearer handle on the central questions and developments in this really complex case.
Without getting totally lost in all the information out there.
Precisely. Okay, so let's maybe unpack this by looking at how things unfolded right at the very beginning.
Right. So the morning of December 26, 1996, it kicks off with Patsy Ramsey's now, well, incredibly famous 911 call.
Reporting JonBenét missing.
Missing, yeah, and mentioning a ransom note, demanding $118,000.
And it's quite striking how quickly the focus shifted, wasn't it, once JonBenét's body was actually discovered?
Oh, absolutely. In the basement. Just a few hours later, died from strangulation and a head injury.
And it seems like that initial police response really kind of shaped the whole investigation moving forward.
Yeah, our sources talk about how John and Patsy Ramsey pretty quickly fell under what was described as an umbrella of suspicion.
An umbrella of suspicion, that's quite the phrase.
It is. The early emphasis from Boulder PD really heavily scrutinized the parents. Several factors played into this.
Like the ransom note being found inside the house.
Exactly. That was a big one. Found inside their home.
Which, yeah, brings us right to that ransom note. It's such a pivotal piece of this whole thing.
It really is.
A lengthy, handwritten note reportedly found on a staircase near the kitchen.
That's right. And that $118,000 demand. It wasn't just a random number, was it?
No, it matched John Ramsey's bonus that year.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No. Which is odd. The sheer unusualness of that note compared to, typical ransom demands is a key point.
How so?
Well, our sources highlight its length, like multiple pages.
Right.
And the language was just strange, sort of rambling.
Yeah.
Included what seemed to be lines from movies like Dirty Harry.
Really? Movie quotes?
Yeah. Usually ransom notes are short, direct, get to the point.
Okay.
This rambling style, it could suggest someone, maybe inexperienced, trying to copy what they've seen, or maybe to hint at something else psychologically.
And it wasn't just what it said, but the question of who actually wrote it. Handwriting analysis became a huge deal.
Oh, massive.
Yeah.
And eventually, a federal court ruling looking at expert analysis concluded it was highly unlikely Patsy Ramsey was the author.
Highly unlikely. So that challenged the early police theory then.
It definitely did. The theory that Patsy wrote it to stage a kidnapping. But it's worth noting, some people, not qualified experts, kept publicly pointing the finger at her anyway.
Right. Okay, so we have the early suspicion on the Ramseys, this really weird ransom note. Where did the forensics take things?
Ah, forensics. Well, that just adds another layer of complexity, especially the DNA findings.
Tell me about that.
So, initial testing back in 2003 identified an unknown male genetic profile found on JonBenét's clothing.
An unknown male.
Yes, and crucially, this DNA profile excluded John, Patsy, and Burke Ramsey.
Okay, so that sounds like a major turning point.
It seemed like it. It led to the Ramsey family being formally cleared in 2008 by the district attorney.
Cleared. So exonerated.
Well, they even got a letter of apology from the DA. So on the surface, yes, it looks like a definitive exoneration.
I sense a but coming.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because later, former police chief Mark Beckner and other investigators too, they kind of questioned if it was a complete exoneration based just on that DNA.
Why? What was the issue?
They pointed out it was described as touch DNA, found in really tiny amounts.
Touch DNA.
Meaning it could potentially get there from casual contact or maybe even contamination. It wasn't like, say, blood or semen.
Ah, okay.
So they questioned whether its presence definitively linked it to the actual killer. Think of finding a stray hair somewhere. It doesn't automatically mean that person committed a crime there.
That's a really important distinction. So even with that 2008 clearance, these questions about the DNA, its source, its meaning, they just linger.
They absolutely do.
What about newer forensic technology? Anything happening there?
Our sources do indicate that more advanced DNA analysis techniques and genetic genealogy are being looked at now, or at least there's hope they might be applied more fully.
Genetic genealogy, that's the stuff you hear about solving cold cases, right?
Exactly. These newer methods can work with even tinier or degraded samples. And genetic genealogy compares the unknown DNA to public databases, trying to find relatives, build a family tree, potentially leading to the source, even without a direct hit in a criminal database.
So there's still hope that the DNA could provide answers.
That's the hope, yeah, that these sophisticated techniques might finally pull a solid lead from that existing evidence.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The theories and the long list of potential suspects over the years, the family member theory was, as we said, the initial focus.
Absolutely. The note inside, the body found inside, some reports of initial reluctance to cooperate fully. It all pointed inward at first for the police.
And there was that grand jury recommendation, wasn't there?
Right, in 1999, a grand jury actually recommended indicting John and Patsy for child abuse resulting in death.
But they weren't prosecuted.
No, the DA at the time declined. Said there wasn't enough evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt for a conviction, which, highlights the different legal standards for indictment versus conviction.
Right. So the grand jury thought maybe, but the DA needed more certainty for a trial?
Essentially, yes. They didn't think they could prove murder specifically.
Then there's the flip side, the intruder theory. That gained traction with the DNA, right?
It certainly did. And people like Detective Lou Smith, who was brought into the case, became really strong advocates for it.
What evidence did they point to?
Our sources mentioned things Smith emphasized, like a broken basement window. And there was a suitcase placed underneath it.
A suitcase?
Yeah, apparently it didn't belong to the family. Smith thought maybe it was used as a step.
Okay.
There was also a piece of rope found in a guest bedroom the Ramseys didn't recognize. And that partial boot print.
Oh, yeah, the boot print in the basement.
A high-tech brand print. Also didn't match anyone in the family.
Those are definitely intriguing details. They do suggest someone from outside could have been involved.
They certainly fuel that theory.
What about some of the other individuals whose names have come up over the years? There have been quite a few.
Oh, yeah. The case has seen a number of other names surface. Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's brother.
He was cleared, though, right?
He was formally cleared in 2008, along with his parents, and he was never officially a suspect. But unfortunately, he's been the subject of speculation, especially in some documentaries later on. Then there was Gary Oliva, a convicted sex offender in Boulder. He actually confessed in 2006.
He confessed.
Yeah, but his DNA didn't match any evidence from the scene, so that went nowhere.
Okay.
And remember, John Mark Carr, arrested in Thailand, big international news.
Vaguely, yeah.
He claimed he was there when JonBenét died, but again, released. DNA didn't match.
Wow. And even a housekeeper.
Linda Hoffman-Pugh. Yeah, she voiced some suspicions publicly about Patsy. Police looked into her, but no actual evidence ever implicated her.
It really does feel like a maze, just leads going everywhere and nowhere.
It's incredibly complex.
Now, that YouTube source you mentioned analyzed John and Patsy's body language. What did the analyst pick up on?
Well, analyzing nonverbal cues in these high-stress interviews is always tricky, But the analyst pointed out a few things, like potential blocking gestures from Patsy during certain denials, hands moving in front of her body, that sort of thing.
Suggesting.
Well, some interpretations suggest that could indicate, like, a psychological distancing from what she's saying, trying to protect herself.
Okay. Anything else with Patsy?
They also noted a moment where a slight head shake, a no shake, happened at the same time as a verbal denial, followed by a really long eye blink.
A head shake during a denial.
Yeah, like the body contradicting the words. The analyst suggested that combo could be interpreted as discomfort, or maybe defensiveness.
Interesting. And what about John Ramsey?
For John, the analysis highlighted what they called gravity-defying gestures.
Gravity-defying, like what?
Upward hand movement, sort of more animated, when he spoke about finding the killer.
And what might that mean?
Well, these kinds of gestures are sometimes associated with feelings of relief, or maybe even excitement. The analyst sort of cautiously suggested it could indicate relief that suspicion might be moving away from him. Or it could just be a genuinely positive reaction to the idea of the real killer being caught, finding justice.
Right. It's interpretation, isn't it?
Exactly. And the analyst was careful to say these aren't proof of guilt. They call them red flags, maybe.
Yeah.
And interestingly, they mentioned their own view evolved over time, later considering other possibilities, including Burke Ramsey, more seriously.
It's a really important reminder, isn't it, how subjective body language analysis can be, especially out of context.
Absolutely. You can't convict someone based on a gesture in an interview.
Let's shift to Patsy Ramsey's own perspective based on the sources. How did she see things?
Well, Patsy consistently and really vehemently maintained her innocence, her family's innocence, right from the start until she passed away from ovarian cancer in 2006. Our sources show she was really frustrated, disappointed with how the police investigation went. She felt their early focus on the family stopped them from properly chasing other leads.
And she held on to hope that the killer would be found.
Deeply. There's a really poignant detail from Lou Smith, the detective who championed the intruder theory.
Yeah.
He said Patsy's last words to him were basically a plea. Find who did this to JonBenét before she died.
Wow. That's heavy.
Yeah. And she also reportedly had this strong belief she'd be reunited with JonBenét and her older stepdaughter who had also passed away in the afterlife.
It's just heartbreaking to think about grieving her daughter while facing all that suspicion.
Immense pressure.
What about John Ramsey? His efforts since then?
John Ramsey still believes the case can be solved. He often points to the advancements in DNA technology we talked about.
Like the newer techniques?
Yeah. He talks a lot about the huge burden of wrongful suspicion his family carried for years. And he just hopes for closure, for justice, for JonBenét.
Understandable.
He's been pretty vocal about wanting his remaining kids, his grandkids, to live without this shadow hanging over them.
And the media's role in creating that shadow, it was just huge in this case, wasn't it?
Oh, immense. A global sensation almost overnight.
Yeah.
The Ramsey family faced relentless media scrutiny, often really intrusive. Tabloids especially were running leaked photos, unverified claims. It often felt like they blurred the line between reporting and just pure sensationalism.
And that intense spotlight must have affected the investigation too.
Undoubtedly.
Oh.
Added huge pressure and definitely shaped public perception. And the whole child beauty pageant aspect of JonBenét's life, that became a massive and often controversial focus for the media.
Right, that detail seemed to really capture public attention.
It did. And then over the years, you've had countless documentaries, docuseries.
Keeping it in the news.
Exactly. Keeping it in the public eye, but also often pushing their own specific theories, their own interpretations, which makes it hard for people to sort fact from speculation.
Yeah, it adds more layers of confusion sometimes.
It does. It's interesting, though, the director of one docuseries we looked at actually stated publicly he believed Patsy was innocent. He pointed to certain autopsy details that, in his view, suggested a more skilled killer.
So even within the media interpretations, there are conflicting views.
Definitely.
Okay, finally, let's touch on the investigative challenges, because it sounds like there were significant problems right from the start.
The sources are pretty clear on this. Those first hours after the 911 call, many considered the police tactics controversial, and the crime scene itself potentially contaminated.
How so?
Well, numerous people, friends, family, apparently entered the house before it was properly secured by police.
Oh, wow. Not ideal.
Not ideal at all. It raises serious questions about the integrity of some of the early forensic evidence collected.
And there were issues between different police agencies, too?
Yeah, reports of conflict or at least a lack of smooth cooperation between the local Boulder police and outside agencies brought in to help. That kind of friction never helps an investigation, hinders sharing info.
Right.
And then just the simple passage of time. It's a cold case now. Memories fade, evidence can degrade or get lost.
Right.
It all makes solving it much, much harder.
So wrapping up this incredibly complex deep dive, it's just clear the JonBenét Ramsey case remains this deep, perplexing puzzle.
Totally perplexing.
Right.
We've looked at that controversial initial police response, these numerous conflicting theories pointing inside the family, pointing outside.
And the role of forensic tech, especially DNA, which keeps evolving.
Yeah, and what's really striking is that while the Ramseys were officially cleared based on that 2003 DNA finding,
right,
the source of that DNA, what it actually means, that's still a huge point of debate.
Still questions surrounding it.
Big questions. And you get all these other clues, this weird ransom note, the boot print, the window. They just keep fueling the investigation, or at least the public speculation.
It certainly leaves us with a lot to think about. So for our final provocative thought today, considering everything we've discussed, the mishandled crime scene, the intense focus shifting between different people, what single piece of evidence, if you could analyze it perfectly with today's absolute best technology, do you think holds the most potential to finally unlock the truth here?
That's a tough one. This case, yeah, it's just such a powerful and frankly somber reminder of how difficult these unsolved crimes are, the challenges, the complexities, and that enduring quest for justice, even decades later.